of this. We're gonna get started. So my name is Felicia. I will be chairing and hosting today's meeting, trying my best to infuse the space with love and warmth that Furuz always does. So give me some grace as I haven't been in this space in a while. But before we get started, we will start with a prayer. And I am wondering if Jamile, my sweet, dear great aunt, wouldn't
Love.
mind sharing a prayer for us, with us, in any language that you'd like.
In French, can go?
Yes.
Ok. Je me suis levée ce matin par ta grâce, mon Dieu, entièrement confiant en toi. M'en remettant à tes soins, j'ai quitté ma demeure de ciel de ta miséricorde, fais descendre bénédiction sur moi. Et permets-moi de retourner sain sauf à mon foyer, comme tu m'as permis d'une sortie sous ta protection. Mes pensées fermement fixées sur toi. Il n'y a pas d'autre Dieu que toi, l'unique, l'incomparable, l'omniscient, le très sage. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you so much. We'll have an opportunity to also say some more prayers at the end. But tonight we are joined by Shahin Sobhani, who will be giving a talk on how can we bring hope in place of despair and unity in place of conflict. This is also my father, so I'm like reading his bio, but I know him as my role model and parent in my life, but he is a serial entrepreneur and consultant who focuses on supporting companies to make an impact on the betterment of communities they serve. He is the executive producer of 239 Days and One Common Faith, which we'll put links to in the chat as well. But more importantly, he has infused a Baha'i identity in his children, and he's here today to chat with all of us. So thank you for joining. And he's muted.
I got introduced by my daughter. So exciting. Life is good. No, thank you, Felicia. That was really nice. Furu said, it's a surprise. She's going to introduce you. And she told me a week ago. So she couldn't hold it. So it was really nice to see Felicia. And I'm glad she told me because I would have been focused on Felicia. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I really want to have more of a consultation and a conversation more than anything else. And I would like to open it up at the end when I'm done for just a few words that I'm going to say. And I want to begin, as the title, as you saw, I want to begin that I think all of us can accept that, with every passing day, we see the world growing more despair. I mean, that I don't have to. I could just turn on CNN right now, and we could watch for 2 minutes, and you'll realize that immediately. Even the divisions between people and nations are getting more severe, and it's impacting everyone. This despair and the divisions is impacting everyone. When you look at mental health, for example, and the crisis that we're living in when it comes to mental health, it's something that we really should think about with a humanity that's in this travails that it's going through. At the same time, we should not be confused by them. I think there are answers of why humanity is going through what it's going through. We are, of course, saddened by them. There's no, of course, that's the case. But we should not be confused by them. And more importantly, we should not be paralyzed by them. because we have to make even more effort to create hope in a place of despair and unity in a place of conflict. So those are very ideal words from myself. I accept that. So let's go and break up. What does that mean? Hope in place of despair and unity in place of conflict. And I think we all agree that the despair and the conflict exists. So the question is, how do we do that? And that's what I'm going to attempt to answer. And then we're going to answer it together and figure it out. So this is just one human being's concept of how we can do that. For me, I think the first thing we need to do is to go back to some important sources for human history to find the answers. That's, I think, the number one thing. Don't try to make it up on our own with our own minds. Let's go back and figure out what the sources are that has taught what the world should be like and where there is hope. And when I say sources, I'm not talking about Karl Marx or Aristotle or any other person that's influenced generations of humanity. No, I'm not talking about those individuals. I'm talking about individuals that had a divine source. Now that's a big word, divine source, right? With a capital D. And some of you may say, whoa, you're using the word divine now. And who has that authority? Who can have that divine source? So from my understanding and from what I've understood, just the research that I've done, there's a test to see what is a divine source. We don't have to go far, and these tests are very clear, at least to me. And I think let's be very scientific and figure that out. Because if we can figure out what the divine source is, then let's go to that source and let's see what they say. So one, there's going to be 3 criteria to see what's a divine source. I think the first criteria that I would like to put on the table is these individuals that claimed to be divine messengers. They claimed that they were messengers from God. Let's look at what happened to them. Let's look at their lives. I think that should be criteria number 1. Did they live a plush life and had 54 Rolls Royces running around? Or were they killed and persecuted? That should be number 1 criteria. Put that aside. Let's go to the second criteria, or the second test, and that is, were their teachings revolutionary? These individuals, were their teachings revolutionary for the time that they came? And were religious leaders of the time agree with that? Second test. Let's put that criteria aside for a second. Let's go to the third one, and that is, did their teachings last the test of time? Compared to the powerful people or individuals or governments of the time, and those individuals that were very powerful, do they still exist today and their teachings versus these divine messengers? So these are the 3 criteria we're going to test to see if these individuals that I'm about to tell you are divine. And the 3 individuals, the 3 divine messengers who claim to be divine messengers that we're going to test this with is Moses, Christ, and Muhammad. If you believe in any of these or not is not the point. All we're going to do is do these tests that I just mentioned and see if they pass it, right? So the first criteria was, do they live a plush life? Do they live a comfortable life and just do their teachings? Let's test it with Moses. Moses definitely did not live a plush life. In fact, he was chased by Pharaoh all the way until the Red Sea, and we know the story there. He did not come from riches, for sure not, even though he lived in the Pharaoh's household. After he declared himself as a messenger of God, everything he had was gone. So Moses was persecuted. So criteria number 1, you'll see immediately that Moses as an individual, divine messenger, did not live a comfortable life. Was his teachings revolutionary? Criteria number 2. That's a very good question. So let's look at it. He comes down from a mountain, if you believe it or not. Let's suspend disbelief for a second. But he comes down with what's called the 10 Commandments. Commandments that at that time were revolutionary. Not for us today, but for then, it was extremely revolutionary. And if we have time, we could literally go through all 10 commandments and see if that's the case. Third test, third criteria. Did his faith last the test of time versus the contemporaries of his time? Who's his contemporary? Pharaoh. Has Moses' teachings and his life lasted beyond Pharaoh? All I need you to do is go to a museum. The only thing left of Pharaoh are the mummies. That's all. There's nothing left of Pharaoh. No one is following Pharaoh. Not even the Egyptians. Right? So these are just artifacts of these individuals of the time. Moses, on the other hand, there's a whole nation and 12 million people that follow his faith. So it has lasted the test of time. And remember those 10 commandments? Well, guess what? Those 10 commandments are the basis of law in the world today. So they are extremely important as when he came down with them all those years ago. So for me, Moses passes the divine source test. Now let's go to His Holiness Christ, Jesus Christ. First test. Did he live a plush life? All we know about Jesus is that he was a carpenter, and then we know he declared his mission. So he definitely did not live a plush life. And the moment he declared his mission, he was not only persecuted, he was crucified. So test number 1, if this is a divine messenger, I think Jesus Christ passed it. And the reason I bring that as a criteria, you don't think it was easy for Moses or Christ to say, you know what, forget about it. I'm just going to go do my carpentry. I don't need this. You don't think Christ could have done that? Of course he could have, but he didn't. He was called by God to give the teaching of love, and he did. And at the end of his life, he had 12 disciples, actually probably 11 if you look at Judas. And the most powerful of his contemporary was Caesar, who crucified him, and of course the religious leaders of the time. So the question you ask yourself is, what happened to Caesar versus what happened to Christ? Are people Christians? Absolutely, 1.3 billion of them. How many people follow Caesar today? 0. How many people even know about Caesar today? Many of us, we eat Caesar salad all the time. That's all that is left of Julius Caesar. So again, criteria number 2 when it comes to the contemporary. Criteria number 3 for Christ, which was number 2 actually, was his teachings revolutionary? Absolutely. So much so that he tells the rabbis, if you would have known Moses, you would have known me and what he did when it comes to their social laws that he changed. So he was very revolutionary, and that's why people were scared of his teachings and finally crucified him. Let's go to the next messenger of God, the person that claims he's a messenger of God, Muhammad. So Muhammad comes at a time in a place that's probably one of the most violent in the world. And what people were doing to each other was just uncalled for. And he is called to be a messenger of God and was persecuted as well. He was taken out of Mecca and exiled to Medina. Was his teachings revolutionary? Absolutely they were. What he taught, for example, when it came to respecting women, for example, was revolutionary, considering that the Arab tribes were burying the first first child if it was a female. That's how they treated women at the time. So compared to what Muhammad was teaching and the society, and of course when it came to the violence that came with that. And then of course the last criteria also for Muhammad was, is his teaching last the test of time? And of course they do. Look how many Muslims there are in the world today. So when you look at these three individuals that said they were divine messengers, you could see they passed all three tests and they have outlasted this time. Now, if you follow my logic, don't worry, we're going to get to a point here because we believe that these three individuals, I'm trying to prove to you that these three individuals have something to say to bring hope to the world. We're going to get to that. But before I do, now let's test the faith of Baha'u'llah. So Baha'is believe that Baha'u'llah is one of these divine messengers. So why don't we test his life and see if he matches the other three individuals, divine messengers that I told you. So did he have a plush life? Absolutely. Baha'u'llah, out of all of them, had the most plush life. He had an incredible life. He was the son of the minister of the Shah. I'll give you an example of how plush his life was. His life was so plush that when they went picnicking every few months during the summer months, they would go to a grove, a picnic grove of land that belonged to his father, and there were trees in the middle of this grove, and they had a picnic there. That land was 4,000 acres of land, and that was just their picnic land. Did he live a plush life? Absolutely. But then he declares his mission. He talks about the unity of the human race. He talks about that I am a messenger of God. Everything I just told you is taken away from him. He's put in a prison called the Black Pit, where he almost dies. They put chains on his neck and shoulders that leave an imprint the rest of his life. The chains were so heavy, they were given names. And then he's exiled to Baghdad, to Turkey, and eventually to Palestine, which is Israel today, and he dies a prisoner. So again, especially in the case of Baha'u'llah, he had an extremely plush life. Probably the closest to him was Moses. He was living in the house of the Pharaoh. Could he have said, I don't need this. I don't need to teach these things, and give up that plush life? And of course he did. Was his teachings revolutionary? And we're going to go through some of those today. But absolutely, the equality of men and women, for example, was extremely revolutionary. That we don't need clergy anymore in a place where everything was the clergy was extremely revolutionary. And then the question is, did he last the test of time? Well, the contemporaries of his time was Nasiruddin Shah and the other Shahs of the time. They don't exist today. The test of time is probably the one that you need to think about the most, only because of the time that's elapsed. It's only 180 years since Baha'u'llah proclaimed his mission. It's 200 years since he was born. So it's a fairly new faith in that respect when you talk about the test of time. But it is the second most widespread religion in the world today. Not in numbers, there are 8 million Baha'is around the world, but in the number of people that have accepted his teachings. It's the second most widespread based on Encyclopedia Britannica, with Christianity as a whole being the most widespread around the world. So the issue of test of time is something that's subjective. You have to look at that, but considering it's only 180 years old. Now, if you keep following my logic, what I was trying to do in that long statement is to show you that these four individuals, in my opinion, are divine messengers. And in my opinion, we should look at their words, not someone that interpreted their words, only their words. And let's see what they say as a source. That's what I'm asking us to do. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to share 4 statements, and I want us to, Felicia, can you see that? Okay. So all I want is that we look at these statements. We're going to read them together. And what I want is for you to see similarities, but also if you see any differences in these words. And if I would have hidden all the sources, would you have actually figured out which one is for which religion? That is one thing I would love for you to consider, and I probably should have hidden the sources. Let's do the first one, which comes from the Torah, from the faith of Moses. He says, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor." That is the whole Torah. The rest is the explanation. Go and learn. Isn't that beautiful? Basically, this statement is saying the entire Torah, which is in a small book, is what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. That is the whole Torah. Everything else is just explaining this statement. Go and learn. So that's the Torah. Let's go from the words of Christ and let's see what it says. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets, capital L, capital P. I'll read it again. So everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets, with an S at the end of prophets, which makes it not only universal, but eternal, both in the past and the future. Let's go to the next one, which comes from the words of Muhammad. This is a hadith that Muhammad said. None of you truly believes until he loves for his brother that which he loves for himself. Do I need to say more? Does it say none of you truly believes until he loves for his brother that's a Muslim that which he loves for himself? No. It says until he loves for his brother. That's everybody. That which he loves for himself. So that's from the faith of Muhammad. Now let's see what Baha'u'llah says on the same topics. Lay not on any soul a load that you would not wish to be laid upon you, and desire not for anyone the things you would not desire for yourself. My question to you, and we'll get to this in the Q&A part, is as you read these 4 statements, doesn't it give you hope? It should, because these are statements directly from the messengers. These are statements directly from the divine source. And if I would have taken out the references, I promise you, you would have had a hard time, except maybe the first one, because it says Torah, to match the statements with the religions. So if the divine source is so clear of how we should act, then what is the problem? That is the next question we need to ask ourselves. But I think the first thing we could agree on is if every human being that follows these great faiths just practices what's on the page here in black and white, do you believe the world will become another place? That's what you have to ask yourself. I personally think absolutely. If they truly, sincerely follow what it says here. So when you, just to give an example, when you read the verse from Muhammad, would individuals take a plane into a building on 9/11 based on this sentence alone? The answer is 100% no. But then the question you need to ask yourself is then why does it happen? Why, if the source is clear, does these things happen and cause this despair? And that's where I really want to now get into what I believe is humanity's turning its back on principles that are needed for today. And for me, as a Baha'i, I believe that Baha'u'llah has proclaimed and has made a great claim, and no one should take it lightly, that he has principles and truths with a capital T, just like all those great religions, that will help guide humanity to not only peace, but unity that it absolutely needs, and hence the hope that comes with that. So if you take the context of why these things happen, let's take the first one. If you notice, I kept saying, these are the words of the divine messengers, not the interpretation of these words. That is a big flash of conflict, a matter of interpretation. Individuals have decided what these great divines are saying and what do they mean. And that has caused conflict. What counterweights that is Baha'u'llah's own principle. He says that one of the main principles that need to be followed by humanity is independent investigation of truth. You have to go and study and figure out what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, and independently investigate that truth by yourself with your brain, your hands, your eyes, your ears, and figure that out. And by the way, that's not only new in Baha'u'llah's faith, that was also in His Holiness Christ. Jesus, of course, also taught this aspect of finding it. And He even gave a hint to the disciples. He said, if you're trying to find if something is true, if a new messenger comes, this was within the context of how do we know when you have returned? He said, if the fruit is good, the tree is good. That's a beautiful statement, very simple. If you eat a piece of fruit from a tree, the tree is healthy. The chances that the tree is good. What does that mean? Look at the principles. Do they make sense? Are they right? If they are, then the source is good. And that's a litmus test from Jesus Christ Himself. Let's go to another principle, ignorance. This is why the world is in despair. Because of ignorance. They don't take the time to investigate the truth. And some of the reason is they can't even read and write in some parts of the world. Counterweight, Baha'u'llah's principle of compulsory education. We have to make every effort to educate humanity so they can investigate the truth. So it's a fundamental principle of the Baha'i Faith. Another reason for despair, fanaticism, which are born from both ignorance and interpretation. And a lot of it, unfortunately, comes from fanatical religious leaders. And this is something that also we need to look at for the despair. And what's the counterweight to Baha'u'llah's principles? No clergy. We have to use our own eyes and ears and going back to the independent investigation of truth. So there is no clergy in the Baha'i Faith. Everyone's responsible for their own spiritual well-being. Let's go to another principle, progressive revelation. For me, I'm always surprised that people believe that their faith is it and nothing else, and that's that. I'm always surprised by that because that's not how it works with everything else in our society, both materially, educationally. Think of it. Let me ask you a question just for a second. What is the only purpose of your teacher in 5th grade? There's only one purpose. 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, any teacher, any grade has only one purpose that they have to fulfill. Think about that for a second. What could it be? Some people say, well, just to educate you and to learn the subjects of that grade. Yes, but that's not the only purpose. The only purpose of a teacher of any grade is to prepare you for the next grade, right? There is no other purpose. If the teacher did not do their job and you fail and can't go to the next grade, the teacher failed. If you, of course, didn't study, then you failed. But if the teacher did their job, their only job is to prepare you for the next grade. Why can't we look at religion that way? Why is that so difficult for us? Listen, I have an iPhone 15 now. Guess what? In a year, I'm going to get the next one. Why? I upgrade. Why do I upgrade? Why don't I keep my iPhone 4, which I had one, by the way? Because it won't work in today's society. We upgrade things all the time. The question is, why can't we upgrade our religion? When you upgrade, by the way, this iPhone 15, the foundation of it is the iPhone 4. It couldn't function if iPhone 4 never came. So this idea that we're giving up on a religion is a hoax. No, we're adding to it. Like going to 7th grade and saying 2nd grade and 4th grade didn't need it. You wouldn't be in 7th grade without it. So if we think that way in other ways, why can't we do it with religion? And that's progressive revelation, in my opinion. Here's another one of why there's despair. Women and men are not treated as equals. How can you have peace? How can you have unity when half of society is not seen as an equal? Counterweight of Baha'u'llah's principle, equality of man and woman. He said there are two wings of one bird. Humanity cannot fly if these two are not equal. They, of course, have their purposes in society and the planet Earth, but they have to be. And God, he says, has always seen them as equal. Let's go to another one. It's one of my favorites. Harmony between science and religion. Unfortunately, we have a society in some parts of the world that science has basically taken the entire psyche and religion is nothing. And look at the havoc we've created because of that. We can destroy each other 70 times over with just the nuclear weapons we have. We're destroying the planet when it comes to climate change because of the greed that we have. And we can do what we want. And there are some parts of the world that the religion is definitely in charge and science is looked at as a nothing. Well, there's so much superstitions in those societies, right? Especially when it comes to how women are treated in those societies. So this concept of harmony between science and religion is critical. One of my favorite quotes of the Baha'i Faith is religion as science is science. If we tear apart that, it's a beautiful, absolutely beautiful quote. So let's tear it apart together. Religion as science is science. You know, if I was said to you, if it says science is science, if I said to you, you know, I love sciences, but I hate chemistry. Let's just take out chemistry and we'll be fine. Well, you can't do that because it's one system. If I said to you, okay, fine, we'll keep chemistry, but I don't like French chemistry. Well, we can't do that either because it's one system. But when it comes to religion, we try to do that all the time. Why do we? It's one system. It's one incredible system, and in fact, a more complex system. Why? Because religion deals with the soul. It deals with morals. It deals with characters. It deals with who we are as human beings, which are souls that happen to have bodies, not bodies that happen to have souls. So that's why religion is actually more complex when you think about it that way. Last principle, unity and diversity. We have created barriers on the planet that make no sense. Who put a barrier between Canada and the US, or between Ukraine and Russia, or between Israel and Lebanon? We did. God sure didn't. And, you know, when a virus came in 2020, it didn't need a passport. It didn't care about those borders. So then the question becomes, how do we solve these issues of these made up things that we have created in humanity? And for me, the only way is to see that unity and diversity. You know, when I lived in a city called Frederick, Maryland, 40 some years ago, this concept was very foreign. Why? I'll just give you an example through food. The only ethnic food we had in Frederick, Maryland, when I was a teenager, was a Chinese restaurant. And when we went there, we were like, wow! Now you can eat any ethnic food in Frederick, Maryland. Humanity is experiencing different cultures all the time. And that's why it's become more difficult when it comes to the issue of race. And that's another principle, for example, eliminations of all forms of prejudice. Because now we're living in the same planet, in the same environment, and we can't hold on to those old prejudices that we had in the past. So unity and diversity is the counterweight to what is needed for today, and that's what Baha'u'llah taught. So, for me, I'm just going to end. I promised myself to stay within 35, 40 minutes. I just want to end with the following statements. You know, Baha'is everywhere, their whole purpose, and I'm going to read you 2 quotes at the end, is to build these vibrant communities, to take these principles that I mentioned to this point, these core principles, and to bring them in their everyday affairs and their communities, amongst their families, amongst their community members, at their workplace, and make an attempt to hopefully bring hope and unity in the places that they function throughout the world. You know, the international governing body of the Baha'i community, the Universal House of Justice, actually gave the Baha'i community as a model to test if what they believe works. And I encourage everyone to do that, because it's a call from the Universal House of Justice to do that. And if you want to know where that call is, go to a document called One Common Faith, and we created an e-learning course out of it. And you can go, Felicia will put on the link to One Common Faith, which is basically onecommonfaith.net, where they give that. And then in your own communities, you know, if you think you can't change the world, change your neighborhood. And can you, through these principles that I taught? For example, a plug for Oakville, where I live, we have, and people that live in the area, I hope you're listening, you know, we have this thing called the Oneness Summit this Sunday, where our whole goal is to extend to everyone the hands of friendship, of common endeavor, of a shared service, and of a collective learning. And we want to advance as one, as a community. That's a mission statement of this summit that we're creating here. And it's our first one, and hopefully an annual one. So every community has to put their best effort to try to put these principles into play. And then I'm going to end with these 2 quotes from Baha'u'llah of why Baha'i, you know, why are Baha'is saying all these things? Why do they tick? What is it that's making them do what they do? And this is, these 2 particular statements from Baha'u'llah are the reasons why. The first one, be anxiously, this is from Baha'u'llah, he's saying it to everyone, not just Baha'is, but everyone. Be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age you live in, and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements. We can well perceive how the whole human race is encompassed with incalculable afflictions. It is incumbent upon every man of insight and understanding to strive to translate that which has been written into reality and action. Blessed and happy is he that ariseth to promote the best interest of the peoples and kindreds of the earth. So that's the mission statement of what we are trying to accomplish. And I guess I'll end with, try those criteria that I gave, and do investigate and see if there's any validity in these words of Baha'u'llah, and will they make an impact on society. And I hope you see what I see, that there is a lot of hope in the time of despair, and there is opportunity for unity in a time of conflict. Thank you, everybody.
You're getting a round of muted applause.
Nice. I'll take it.
Okay, we already have a hand raised. Aniela. Please go ahead.
That was a smashing talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
What occurs to me as I listen to you is that, with each holy writing directed to humanity, is the ante is raised about love and how we care for one another. And here comes Baha'u'llah that says, you know all of that, right? Justice is the most great law. And the purpose of justice is the appearance of unity amongst men. So we've had lots of time to learn about love and practice love. And yet it has not yielded what it needs to yield because we're missing this grand ingredient called justice. And, the other thing that occurs to me as I listen to you is indelibly imprinted upon human consciousness is the need for one another. Sociologists say that we will actually kill each other before we'll get close to this word intimacy. And in the Holy Writ, which is fascinating to study human behavior, that's how frightened we are because spaces are not safe. They're not just for so many people. And along comes a religion that is speaking to this very thing. Tablets of the Divine Plan, Abdu'l-Baha says, the object of all the holy manifestations of God is that hearts come to know each other and souls become intimate. So my point is that we not only need each other, individuals walking together, individuals behaving as a community, walking together in this ever-advancing civilization, and institutions that we can actually trust. So every structure that is not built on the premise of justice and the highest of ethics, because we moved into modernity with no ethics. Now we're moving into maturity and modernity, building these ethics based on the revelation of Baha'u'llah and these laws he asks us to circle around. We need each other to do it. And we have to practice clumsily stepping on each other's toes as we learn these stance. But the two things that we can do is be the trusted ones in every space and be the ones that are the hope in every space, and things will begin to ease. I thank you, Shahin. It was lovely, lovely, lovely how you laid it all out.
Thank you very much, Ayala. Any questions or thoughts, especially from people that are new to these topics, that are exploring the Baha'i Faith? I would love to hear from you if you have any thoughts. Or I swear this is a safe place with Felicia in charge. I promise you it is. So feel free to feel free to bring up any questions or thoughts you may have. Shahla, please.
Shahla.
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. It truly is easy to grasp that progressive revelation makes sense the same way as going to school from first grade up to university makes sense. I'm wondering, we are at the age that we are quite intelligent. For most part, we can deduct And yet we allow leaders to mislead us, separate us, set us against each other, and make us do things that we know doesn't make sense. How can we be so unable to decide that when a leader says kill someone, that doesn't make sense? When a government says it all belongs to you, and you can use 70% of the riches of the world, and the rest of the people can use the 30%. How can we accept it and live it, even though we know in reality that it is not just, and it's not fair, and it's not humane? How can we get that mentality out of us?
It's an excellent question, Shahla, and I suggest we take the next 3 hours and try to answer that one because it's a big one, and I think it's a very, very important one. I think for me, and I would love to hear from others, is I love history, and we need to go back to it to understand that. You could say that Julius Caesar was that ruler and government of the time, right? And the world was pregnant at that time. And the world was pregnant, and the birth that came was that love was needed for societies to survive. Unfortunately, a lot of pain the world went through before it realized that. That's one. The other thing I want to bring to your attention, there were a group of people that were taking care of the housekeeping of society when all this was going on. They were saying, hey, no, let's pray together. They had what was called devotionals. They said, no, don't kill each other. We have conflict resolution, and let's study some holy writings together. They are called study circles today. They said, no, don't worry. We have schools for the kids. Let's bring your kids here. They were taking care of the housekeeping of society. And when the Roman Empire fell, the entire society fell into the lap of His Holiness Christ. That was the church. They were taking care of the housekeeping of the planet. And I'm trying to use that analogy because the hope is that we need to take care of ourselves and our neighborhoods and our neighbor. If you notice the quotes that I read to you from those holy divine messengers, the word neighbor, brother was used. It wasn't talking about nations, right? It was individuals to individuals. That's where it begins. And that's where we need to focus. For me, the world is pregnant again. But this time, the birth is the unity of the human race. The question you need to ask is, are we going to have a difficult birth or are we going to have a smooth birth? That's really the only question. I wholeheartedly believe this child will be born. You can't be half pregnant with this one. The world and everything you see is going toward it, right? From technology, the sciences, and so forth. We would be foolish to think that unity of the human race is not needed or necessary. You just have to look and see how necessary it is. So the question still remains, are we going to have an easy birth or are we going to have a difficult birth? But I'm going to play my part and deal with my brother and my neighbor and my community. And I'll do my best to bring these principles that I think are of importance there, because I am not going to try to solve the entire planet. But every drop, every effort collectively will become a beacon of light, just like it was during the time of Christ. And I think it will be today. I think Quanta has a question, Felicia.
Yes, thank you very much, Shahin. I really appreciate your making sort of logical connections to the things that you are trying to teach. I have to, we're talking about humanity progressing. There is there are two issues that I wanted to ask you what you think about it. We are unfortunately living in a diverse world in terms of beliefs. Right now, the horrendous teachings there are in the Torah about warfare, how you can go into a city and do all kinds of horrible things. And with the technology that we have now, the teachings of thousands of years ago is being applied with this horrible technology to kill innocent human beings in a matter of minutes, hundreds of them unarmed. The warfare has become more savage than it was before, because now innocent human beings are being killed by someone that sits in the, and pushes the button and then just throws the bombs. So how are we going to teach people that the old teachings do not apply today? Because then they're going to be very upset.
So,
Because they are using those teachings,
yeah.
like you said, number one. Number two, and I talk to my Christian friends. Jesus taught to turn the other cheek. Jesus told Peter to put his sword in the shield. He taught, really, he was the ultimate peace activist from God, I should say. Yet Christianity has done incredible wars in all the continents when they have invaded and took over the land and killed indigenous people. So they went really against what what Jesus Christ was teaching. So how do we realistically bring these together, then say, okay, today is the day of unity, when they say, well, Moses said, or Abraham said, or David said, I can go and kill people. So what are we going to do here now? How are we going to teach them that that's not the right thing to do?
It's an excellent question as well. And I think, again, I'm going to go back to an answer I gave. Let's use some real examples. I'm not going to be able to meet Donald Trump or Netanyahu or Putin. That's not my job. I in a million years, I won't be able to do that. But I will meet individuals that live in those countries or are close to those countries or are affiliated with those faiths and so forth. And I do think it is my duty, if I believe in the principle of Baha'u'llah that I read at the end, that I should be concerned with humanity and society. And if in a peaceful, empathetic way, to try to have those conversations with those individuals and then put it in action in my everyday life. I have a choice that I could be truthful or not truthful. I have a choice to be kind to the planet or not kind to the planet. I have a choice to be respectful to my elders or not. And I think it's, Baha'u'llah said, let deeds, not words, be your adorning. So I think it's through your actions. I think it's through your conversations that the beacon of light is there. So I think it's the one part that if we don't do that, then we do become paralyzed. And that is a disservice to humanity, right? If we don't do that, it will be a horrible pregnancy. What do we do when someone is pregnant? We do everything to make them comfortable. Everything, right? and that's what our role is as human beings. When it comes to what people have taught, were taught in their faiths, you know, the one example I used once is that, you know, imagine you're 19 years old, but you insist to be on second grade. You know, that's very dangerous. Not only for you, but for the other kids that are actually in second grade. You don't want that. And humanity is holding on to that. And that is part of the problem. I remember I was with a taxi driver and we were having these discussions. And he said, I love what you're saying. It's like having suddenly an individual that's never learned how to drive and been given a car. My God, you know how dangerous that is? It's because you have to have some of these principles. You have to have these aspects for humanity to follow. And I think part of what you see in the world today is that and why people are frustrated with religion, because things that are trying to be applied to a world that doesn't exist anymore at all. And that is not only dangerous, it's actually sad, because we know that there is another way, there is another perspective. And people that are Baha'is, you know, there's no conversion in the Baha'i Faith. Our only job is to share the message. And if someone's interested, great. If they're not interested, no problem. We love you and we continue because we've given at least another perspective.
I think we're gonna go to Nikki and then Jan.
Thank you very much, Shahin. That was really good. And it was very informative. I had a couple of comments here I want to make. I think Christ also in Bible, he said, don't think, I'm just paraphrasing, don't think that I come to bring peace. I come to bring sword. Also, Muhammad, his message, though it was like message of peace, but all his life, it was with war and the sword and killing people and going from one city to another.